So I'm starting on my first quilted jacket and I'm using this McCall's pattern. So we're going to figure it out. So first thing I'm going to do is open the pattern. This is all new to me. So I'm not going to cut the pattern. I don't like cutting patterns. So I am going to figure out what pieces I need from this pattern and then I'm going to trace them. So to trace the pattern, I'm just laying the pattern out and I'm tracing each piece at a time for the piece that I want to cut out. So I've laid some tracing paper over the section I want to cut out and I'm just tracing over it with a pencil and I'll do all of the markings. So I want to lengthen the sleeves because I want the sleeves to have a rolled over edge. So I'm going to, before I cut out the sleeve pattern, I'm going to, where it says to alter it, is to cut along this dotted line. So I've already started, so I'm just going to continue cutting along this dotted line. And I have to alter it in that space. Now I want to make it about 2 inches, so I need the pattern to sit there. So I'm going to place this underneath and then just line it up with the lines on my grid. I'm just going to line it up and take that down. I've got this old vintage quilt that I'm going to use. It's got lots of holes in it, it's got bleach stains. It probably could be repaired, but I'm going to use it for the coat. But it's got a scalloped edge all the way around. So I'm going to keep this edge and use that around the bottom edge of the jacket. So I've folded it in half down the centre, and right now I've pinned the front and the back pieces so that I have hopefully the same pattern on the front and the back. I've lined it up across this bottom edge and I'm making sure that the pattern sort of follows. Now the front edge, actually, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to put, I was going to put a zipper in this jacket, but I'm not going to. So I'm actually going to unpin this and move it right to the edge. I want to have this finished edge and it will fold back over a couple of inches, which is where I've altered the pattern. It's got a seam 1 1/4 inches. I'm going to tuck that in because I'm not having a seam because I've got a finished edge. I'd like to have the pattern going down the centre evenly. I can see through it. Yeah, I'm going to use the rings in the hood, I think. So I want to use this whole section here. And again, put it in line with that purple edge and in the corner. I'm unpicking the lining away and I'll use the fabric to make the pockets. I need to check all the fabrics and do some hand sewing repairs. Okay, now I've hand stitched the repairs, I need to attach these at the shoulder seams. So right sides together, match up the shoulder seams and pin. So I'm going to go over to the machine and sew 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to cut 2 strips 12 inches by 2 inches. And there I have 2 strips. So I'm going to go and press that in half and then open it out and fold in the 2 seams to create a binding. I've made the binding strips and now I'm going to sew them following that first folded edge. Flip it over. So I'm going to nip back some of the seam and the bulk, not too much, just some of it. If the seams are too bulky, you can always just remove the wadding, which I think I'm going to do anyway. So I'm going to cut this back as well. And then bring the binding over, fold it and fold it again to cover the stitches and then sew that down. Now I need to add the pockets. I'm only pinning to the one to the front. I'm not pinning all the way through. So that's loose and I'm going to repeat that for all of the pieces. Now it's time to add the sleeves to the armhole. So right sides of fabric together, I'm matching up the notches and the centre seam and clipping it all in place. Now it's time to sew the seam. Here I'm deciding to add the binding at the same time as sewing the seam. So I'm decided I'm going to pin the binding on through all the layers first before I sew. Now I need to sew down the side seams, so I'm matching up all the markings and the pattern along the sleeves and continuing down the side. I'm just going to sew from there to there and then I'm going to put some binding on. So I made a big error. When I put the pockets in, I should have put them on the right side of the fabric, because now that I've sewn in my sleeve, I've got this raw edge here. So I'm going to have to unpick this bit of binding that I've done here and unpick the pockets and re-sew them on the other side. Should be right sides facing. So So if you've got pretty fabric, make sure that your fabrics are right sides facing together. Okay, I'm going to sew these pockets down the correct way. So there's another mistake that I made. Because I didn't allow for seam allowance here, because I used a finished edge, this is actually longer than the pattern when it's sewn. And the hood is fine, it fits, but it doesn't give me enough to turn round on the end, so I'm going to have to add another strip around the hood. Fortunately, I managed to salvage a long strip off the remainder of the quilt, so I'm going to press this and sew this onto this edge here all the way around, and that will give me extra fabric to fold under to create a nice neat edge. So what I've done is the seam for the hood, as you can see there's two lines going down the hood, and what I did is I cut back and folded under the fabric so I don't have any raw edges. So maybe make it a little bit bigger, that seam, so a good 1/2 inch seam when you're sewing the hood. Sewing this extra piece on, this strip, so this is, how big is this strip? So this was a 2-inch strip, and it's good because it's made a flange for the inside of the hood, so I can make that the channel for my cord. I put in some grommets instead of buttonholes. I just thought these were nicer, and I put some interfacing on the back. So I'm going to, I've already ironed the seam, so I'm going to fold this right over just on the inside of there and top stitch that down to create a flange and a channel. I'm going to just top stitch now this seam down also on this side. And that's just give me a nice little top stitch around the edge. So that's it really. So now for the hood, let's mark the centre. So I've got it nice and central so I can see where it is. So there's my centre mark. But now right sides together, matching centres, and pin all the way around. Now I'm pushing the seam. It naturally wants to go towards the inside, so we'll see how that goes, and then hopefully this should fit. Let's get rid of that, I don't need that. Fit this right to the end there. So for the flange, for the cord, you want to make sure that the hood is about 1/4 inch bigger than the jacket, so that you can allow for the seam allowance when you sew the flange on. Cut out the wadding from the seam allowance, and now to fold this under and sew this. So I've got to at least sew it on the original seam line, which I should have made smaller, but there you go. So one of the last things I need to do is top stitch this down flat now. I don't like it. I could leave it like that, but I don't like it. So I'm going to sew that seam down. And then I think I'm done. Laid that seam flat and it's giving me a top stitch line across there, and I just prefer that. I can see I've got a hole here, I've got a hand stitch, and I think there's a tiny one in the hood there that I've got a hand stitch, and apart from that I'm just going to hand stitch the pockets down. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, all of the above. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully I can continue making these videos for you. Thank you for watching. Until next time.